Hello and a very warm welcome. You are watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. When the invasion of Ukraine started in the year 2022, some said it will take a few days for the Russian forces to capture the capital city of Kiev. And 2 years later, where do things stand? What are they looking like? Ukraine is low on troops and weapons. Its long-planned counter-offensive failed. Support for its president, Volodymyr Zelensky, slipped. American aid for Ukraine is log-jammed in the Congress. The NATO's Baltic members are shivering as Russia flexes its muscles, and Western ammunition stocks are at the bottom of the barrel. Meanwhile, Russia maintains plenty of troops and weapons. Its war machinery continues to churn out even more ammunition. The Russian president test flying a new strategic nuclear-capable bomber, a modernized Tu-160M bomber. The giant swing-wing plane, codenamed Black Jacks by NATO, is a modernized version of a Cold War-era bomber that the former Soviet Union would have deployed in the event of a nuclear war to deliver weapons at long distances. It can carry a crew of 4. It is capable of carrying 12 cruise missiles or 12 short-range nuclear missiles, and it can fly 12,000 kilometers non-stop without refueling. Now that, you see, is a message to the West. It's a reminder of Russia's nuclear capabilities. And if we were to read the tea leaves, it's becoming increasingly clear there is no path on which Ukraine wins the war. And American support will not change that reality. Can the West take on a resurrected Putin? Can it actually turn things around for Ukraine? Perhaps the most important question is, what will Putin do next? He has shown the world Russia's military has adapted. Russia has, in fact, now become an even more formidable enemy. The West has failed to catch up with Russia's arms production pace. Now, Putin is biding his time. He is waiting for Western support for Ukraine to wither. Meanwhile, his troops maintain a steady military pressure along Ukraine's front line. The West is running out of options when it comes to helping Ukraine. You see, they underestimated Russia. It could have been the result of sheer hubris or miscalculation. However, the West is now left with egg on its face. When Russia experienced its first setbacks in the war during the spring of 2022, Western governments pledged unconditional support for Ukraine. They promised to stand by Ukraine for as long as it took to win. In fact, some individuals even called for the West to declare regime change in Russia as their official goal, a goal that is laughable at best. But now, 2 years later, the West is left in a state of depression. Russia has gained the upper hand in the war. After taking the key strongholds of Bakhmut and Avdiivka, Russian troops are now trying to press their advantage in the directions of Marinka, Robotyne, and Kreminna. Amid the fierce battles in Ukraine's eastern front lines, Russia is also trying to cripple Ukraine's defense industries with a steady series of strikes. It's safe to say that today the situation has never looked more perilous for Ukraine or for its neighbors that also share a border with Russia. It takes a large and sustained effort to help an ally fight a long war, and that also against a military superpower. Was the West not ready for this? How could they not anticipate weapons shortage? Clearly, the West did not think this through, but they have made a long list of misjudgments. It goes back to the beginning of the conflict. When they imposed sanctions on Russia, the idea basically was to deprive Putin of the means to fight the war. a complete failure. Because Iran is sending Russia drones, North Korea is sending Russia missiles, China is sending Russia dual-use goods as well as high-tech components. Meanwhile, Western goods are being rerouted through Kazakhstan into Russia. Unlike the West, Russia has switched to a war economy. Its economy grew faster, much faster than any of its large Western counterparts last year. And guess what? The IMF is predicting the same again this year. Still, Putin has repeatedly signaled a desire to negotiate an end to the fighting. Yes, it is contingent on Ukraine accepting the changed ground realities. In fact, earlier this month, during an interview with former Fox News host Tucker Carlson, remember, Putin called on the US to push Ukraine into peace talks. He declared that sooner or later, we will come to an agreement, quote unquote. You may ask, where does this confidence really come from? It's very clear. Look at the state of the West. Aid for Ukraine remains stuck in the US Congress, and the longer it remains in a logjam, the more NATO allies struggle to fill the gap. Zelensky is desperate for more arms, especially following Ukraine's underperforming counteroffensive last summer.
So will Ukrainians survive without Congress support? Of course, but not all of us. And if we understand this price, if the world is ready for this, okay, you will see it. But it's tragedy. It will be tragedy for all of us, not only for Ukraine, not only for Ukrainians, for all Europe. And you will see that they will go. Putin will never stay, will never stop. He will go through Eastern Europe because he wants it.
We need high-range weapons. We talked about this yesterday with congressmen. I talked about this with President Biden. Everyone understands ATACMS for 300 kilometers. That would help us a lot.
Now, what's more, Zelensky's decision to remove his popular military chief, General Valery Zaluzhny, has not helped him improve the situation. It has disappointed many in the country and worried Ukraine's Western allies. The fact is, the US and allies are tired of helping Ukraine. And to add to that, US presidential hopeful Donald Trump has repeatedly claimed that he would negotiate a deal to end the war if he is elected to power again. He has also spooked NATO by saying that he could allow Russia to expand its aggression in Europe if any alliance member fails to increase their defense spending. You best believe if Trump returns to the White House, Putin would be the happiest. It would only serve his goals. How exactly? Well, isn't it obvious? Putin sees Trump as a figure likely to wreak destruction. He believes that a second Trump presidency would weaken the West and deprive Ukraine of the support it needs. It's not helping that there are telltale signs of a withering Western support. The Kremlin is and will be watching out for more signs of crumbling Western support for Ukraine. Putin, who is all but certain to win another 6-year term in the upcoming presidential election, has sought to consolidate the public support by casting the conflict as a fight against an expansionist West. And despite challenges, Russia's vast economic and military potential gives Putin the ability to continue the protracted war. When will the West realize that? Or if they have, when will they admit it is losing? America can only give so much attention to the war in Europe. As we all know, its principal area of interest is in the Pacific. Isn't it time then for the West to come to its senses? What is the realistic step ahead? Perhaps it's time the West stops giving Ukraine false hopes and sincerely helps the country stop further Russian advance. In the long term, both sides will need to sit down and cut a deal. We are nowhere close to that right now. Still, a realization that winning is not on the cards could be the first step. Total defeat also cannot be allowed. Surely the US and allies realize that. The other night, I told you about China's bullying tactics, and tonight I have more to add to that. Chinese hackers targeted Indian government offices, also several other business giants. There has been a massive data leak. The data was dumped on the software developing and code sharing platform GitHub. Where exactly did it come from? A state-linked hacking contractor. It's called iSoon. The leaked data shows the group was directly in communication with the Chinese government. It was hired to keep an eye on the state's quote-unquote enemies, both home and abroad. I will tell you more about the group, but first, what was in the leaked data? It was a hit list of sorts. There were 570 files, images, and chat logs detailing the targets of surveillance. On the hacking group's radar were at least 20 foreign governments and territories. This included India, Hong Kong, Thailand, South Korea, the United Kingdom, Taiwan, Malaysia. There were also contracts to extract foreign data over 8 years. One spreadsheet, in fact, listed 80 overseas targets that the hacking group had already breached. This has naturally sent alarm bells ringing. According to the leaked files, 95.2 GB of immigration data from India was also breached. What is China's problem really? Why is it hiring hackers to target foreign government offices? Is that how desperate it really is? Let me tell you, India was not the only one. 3 terabytes of call logs from a South Korean telecom provider were also hacked. So were telecommunications firms in Hong Kong, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Mongolia, Nepal, Taiwan. iSoon had also been requested to obtain infrastructure data. A leaked spreadsheet shows that the firm had a sample of 459 GB of road mapping data from Taiwan. Can you imagine that? The data dump has exposed the lengths that China is actually going to keep an eye on its rivals. And among other targets were 10 Thai government agencies, including the country's foreign ministry, intelligence agency, and Senate. The spreadsheet shows that iSoon holds sample data extracted from these agencies between 2020 and 2022. Even the NATO was also on the list. Chat logs described selling unspecified data related to the bloc in 2022. Another file showed employees discussing a list of targets in the UK, and this included its home and foreign offices as well as its treasury. The British think tanks, Chatham House, and the International Institute for Strategic Studies were also on the list. The treasure trove did not just reveal China's targets. It also described in detail the methods used by Chinese authorities for surveillance, hack other nations, and promote pro-Beijing narratives on social media. You know what? I can just keep going. Chinese hackers did not mean to spare anyone. They have their eyes everywhere, it seems. This shows just how extensive the Chinese espionage network really is. And this, by the way, is just one hacking contractor we are talking about. There are so many more. Who do you think leaked this iSoon data on the platform? Our guess is either it was an insider gone rogue or a competitor, perhaps another hacking group which was eyeing more business with the Chinese authorities. So naturally, it had to get iSoon out of its way. And iSoon is just a part of an ecosystem of hacking contractors in China. It works for a range of government entities like the Ministry of Public Security, the Ministry of State Security, and the Chinese military as well. You see, in China, it's actually patriotic to spy on other nations. The country has a model of mixing state support with a profit incentive. iSoon has emerged out of the same patriotic hacking culture, which has been thriving for the last 2 decades. This has spawned a large network of hackers competing to grow their businesses, and it has become a global headache. But does China think it can actually get away with it? The hackers for hire are bringing each other down themselves. This time I soon got exposed. Next time it might be some other hacking agency. But the bottom line is, the data breach is out in the open with so many countries on the hit list, especially India. Does China think there will be no retaliation, that nobody will hold it accountable? Well, then it's mistaken. Tensions in the international community are expected to rise. What if the targeted countries actually decide to coordinate more closely with each other and thwart China's shameless attempts? What will the dragon do then? And for our next story, I want to ask you, how much value do you put on someone's skin color? Because in South Korea, the whiter, the better. You heard that right. Sample this. Hollywood superstar Zendaya, an accomplished Emmy Award-winning young actress. She happens to be black and proud. That does not matter in South Korea because several of her photos taken during the promotional tour of her upcoming movie Dune 2 were completely whitewashed. Fans were left aghast when they noticed that Zendaya's complexion had been lightened out. And in some of the pictures, she looks as white as her Caucasian castmates. These pictures have invited backlash from netizens. But this is not the first time an artist has been whitewashed by Korean media. Even Korean artists have been subjected to this humiliating exercise. And this episode has once again sparked a massive debate around South Korea's obsession with white skin. It's not really racism, it's colorism, meaning there is a preference for people with light skin over those with darker complexion, even within the same racial or ethnic group. Often, the Korean media will edit photos and videos of celebrities to make their skin appear lighter. It aligns with the Korean beauty standards, you see. There is a complex culture and history behind Korean beauty standards. According to South Korea's Cultural Heritage Administration, the preference for white skin dates back thousands of years. Murals dating back centuries describe nobles with their pale white skin. White and glossy skin symbolized high class. Records from the 17th century Korea show that those who were assessed as handsome are said to have had white skin. Interestingly, Westerners were not considered white at that time. While people of European origin are often described as white, records show that the Far East Asians did not see them as white. In fact, during the Yuan dynasty, founded by Mongolians and occupied most of what is China, Westerners were called Saikmokin, which is directly translated into people of colored eyes. And so while preference towards white skin dates back centuries, it's unclear why this was actually the case. But most people say it's because the Korean peninsula for the longest time had an agriculture-based economy. Since the wealthy were spared from the burden of everyday labor in the blazing sun, their pale skin was considered a symbol of wealth. Pale white skin, therefore, became a status symbol, and that has remained the case for centuries. Billboards plastered across South Korea will show you artists looking much paler than their actual skin color. We all know how much value South Korea places on vanity. South Korea's beauty standards are so aspirational that it has made the country a global beauty powerhouse. Over the years, it has become a major destination for medical tourism, meaning more and more people are visiting the country for plastic surgeries that can make them look different. And this explains why South Korea has the world's highest number of plastic surgery procedures per capita. That is 13.5 per 1,000 people. The country is also a major producer and exporter of fillers and Botox. K-beauty is all about creating the illusion of a flawless complexion. And this is why porcelain white skin is considered a necessary virtue for beauty in South Korea. People say that attitudes are changing, but if media houses whitewash photos of celebrities to sell their magazines, can the attitude on the ground really be changing? Shifting focus for now, the crisis in the Red Sea is only worsening. Despite the presence of warships of the United States and its allies in the critical waters, the Houthis, in solidarity with the Palestinians, who are facing the brunt of the Israeli offensive in the Gaza Strip, have targeted the Israeli, American and British ships in the Red Sea corridor. To this end, the Houthis have deployed underwater drones, submarine weapons and other ballistic missiles, and have warned that their attacks on commercial shipping of Israel and its allies in the Red Sea corridor will continue, so long as Israel continues with its offensive in the Gaza Strip. Our next report getting you the complete story.
Houthis' terror in Red Sea is on a surge. Temperatures in the critical waters continue to rise as the Iran-backed group has now warned of escalating attacks. And there's a new addition to their arsenal: submarine weapons. These underwater weapons are harder to detect and counter. Thursday was an action-packed day, with Houthis conducting 3 attacks. Anti-ballistic missiles hit a UK-owned cargo ship, setting it on fire. An American destroyer also came under a drone attack. Israel also intercepted ballistic missiles and drones fired towards Eilat. The United States and the United Kingdom hit back, launching strikes on Yemen's northern province of Hodeidah. Earlier, the United States and allied forces shot down 6 drones launched by Houthis, while the French Navy shot down 2 drones in a separate incident. But Houthis have vowed to continue the attack. They say their assaults won't stop until the war in Gaza ends.
العمليات في البحرين الأحمر والعربي.
The Red Sea, Arabian Sea, Gulf of Aden and Bab el-Mandeb Strait operations are ongoing, escalating, effective and impactful. The enemy has failed to prevent them and they have been unable to limit or reduce them.
The United States and its allies have carried out nearly 24 airstrikes on Houthi targets in Yemen since mid-January in an effort to end the attacks on ships in the Red Sea. But the Houthi attacks continue unabated. Pentagon says the Houthis have tried to attack at least 45 ships, and the United States military has shot down nearly 95 drones and missiles. With Tehran's backing, Houthis are seeking to transform itself from a marginal player into one of West Asia's most formidable militant groups.
The attacks are sophisticated, their weapons are sophisticated, and we know where they're coming from. We know that Iran is continuing to supply them with what they, are continuing to launch at U.S. vessels.
Ever since November, Houthi rebels have been targeting Red Sea, Bab el-Mandeb Strait and the Gulf of Aden in support of Palestinians. Around 12% of maritime traffic passes through the key route. Continued attacks have forced many companies to take a longer and more expensive route around Africa. Global supply chain has been disrupted, shipping rates have increased, and supply of vital aid has slowed down. The European Union has launched a naval mission to protect the shipping route. It will complement the efforts of a US-led coalition of 20 countries already present in the region. It seems, until and unless a ceasefire happens in Gaza, Red Sea will not witness any calm. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
In today's day and age, there is growing awareness about mental health and mental illnesses. The COVID-19 pandemic is a big reason. It contributed towards helping normalize conversations around mental health, which was the need of the hour. People around the world who are dealing with mental health issues, now, thankfully, they are being talked about a lot more openly and a lot more often. There is also a growing realization to make it easier for people to talk about their struggles, including the battle with depression. Tonight, I want to ask this question. Do we finally have a cure for depression? Before I get to that, let me ask you this. Have you heard of pacemakers? I'm sure most of you have. They are basically battery-powered devices used to stop the heart from beating too slowly. So, they are for the heart. But what if there were pacemakers for the brain? You heard that right. Pacemakers for the brain. And why am I asking that question? Because of an experimental therapy. It's called deep brain stimulation, or DBS. How exactly does it work? What can it be used for? Let's break it all down for you. A woman dealing with deep recurring depression got electrodes implanted in her brain to help her tackle depression. She suffered from depression symptoms as a child while she was growing up in poverty and dealing with occasional homelessness. Her first major bout happened in college after her father's suicide. One that hit her later left her immobilized, and she ended up in hospital. She had an on and off pattern. After responding to medication for a while, she would relapse. She even thought about ending her life. The DBS treatment happened when nothing else was working. She became one of only a few hundred treated with this treatment for depression. She got the brain surgery done, and she said the first day after surgery, she started feeling a lifting of that negative mood, of the heaviness. She started finding pleasure in music again. She admits DBS has not been a cure-all, and she still takes medicines for depression and needs ongoing care. Researchers say the treatment could help people like her who are dealing with depression that resists other treatments. Many doctors and patients hope it will become more widely available for depression soon. Basically, deep brain stimulation is being tested as a treatment for people with a severe form of depression. So how exactly does it work? It involves implanting electrodes in the brain, which are attached to a device placed under the skin in the chest. Patients are given targeted electrical impulses. Doctors say the stimulation helps because electricity speaks the brain's language. Neurons communicate using electrical and chemical signals. It is being compared to a pacemaker for the brain. In fact, according to a 2022 study, overall, across different brain targets, DBS for depression is associated with average response rates of 60%. Also, by the way, the treatment is approved for Parkinson's disease and epilepsy. But can it really help cure depression? We will have to wait and watch. And from pacemakers for the brain, let's talk about artificial hearts. You heard that right. Australian scientists are developing a long-term artificial heart. Let me say that again, a long-term artificial heart. In fact, the federal government has announced a grant of $50 million towards the project. What do we know so far about it? How exactly will these artificial hearts help and work? Let's get to the details. It's being called an off-the-shelf alternative to organ donation. What a medical miracle, right? Let me just give you a sense of why this is extremely significant. The unfortunate reality is many patients with advanced heart failure end up dying while waiting for a heart transplant. The wait becomes deadly. But what if one does not have to wait? What if the heart is available off the shelf? Basically, the artificial heart will be a long-term alternative to heart transplants. How will it work? Now, we all know that hearts work by beating blood around the body. This artificial heart will send the blood around by using magnetic levitation technology. Basically, a bunch of pipes are used to replicate the heart and the cardiovascular system. And so far, by the way, the good news is that the testing has shown tremendous results. According to reports, the Australian federal government will provide $50 million in funding to support the development of these artificial hearts and other cardiac implants. Naturally, the hope is that the device will be an off-the-shelf, long-term alternative to heart transplants, that the research will ensure more people get access to life-saving technology and eventually, perhaps, replace the need for donor hearts altogether. Word to the wise, do not eavesdrop on your spouse's work calls. It can actually lead to legal troubles and even divorce. Take the example of Tyler Luden from the US, Texas. His wife was a mergers and acquisitions manager at BP. She had been working on a deal to buy an Ohio-based travel center and truck stop business last year. She was working from her home office, and while she was doing her job, her husband was eavesdropping on her business calls. It gave him vital knowledge, following which he went on a buying spree, purchasing more than 46,000 shares in the said company. And he did that without his wife's knowledge. Just weeks before the deal was announced, on the 16th of February 2023, the stocks of the said firm, Travel Centers, soared by nearly 71% after the deal was announced. Now, Tyler sold off all of his shares and made a whopping $1.8 million profit. Sounds crazy, right? Well, it gets crazier. After all, how long can you hide this much money from your wife? Eventually, he confessed to her. And wait till you hear his justification. Tyler told his wife that he bought the shares so that he could make enough money so she does not have to work long hours. A heartfelt gesture, if only the execution was on point. Nevertheless, she reported his dealings to her bosses at BP, who fired her despite having no evidence that she knowingly leaked information to her husband. She eventually moved out of the couple's home and filed for a divorce. Now, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission has charged Tyler with insider trading. They say that Tyler took advantage of his remote working conditions and his wife's trust in order to profit from information he knew was confidential. The case has now fueled a debate in the U.S., particularly at companies whether work from home can really be allowed. Already, banks like Goldman Sachs have been forcing some staff to come in 5 days a week. Others like Google are factoring office attendance into their regular staff performance reviews. Concerns about security and confidential information could end up trumping studies that suggest that working from home can deliver big health benefits. Now, as far as Tyler is concerned, he did not deny the allegations. He has agreed to a partial judgment subject to court approval. That partial judgment will ban him from taking company leadership roles, force him to repay the money he made from the trade with interest, and also pay extra fine determined by the court. The filing said Tyler, who is in his early 40s, is employed with an unnamed publicly listed company, but is not in a sector supervised by the regulator. He faces criminal charges from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Texas. But if you ask us, perhaps his biggest crime was to snoop on his wife. It is a breach of trust. And so this episode should serve as a reminder to everyone. Do not eavesdrop on your spouse's calls. You never know what kind of trouble it could land you in. Cotton candy, candy floss, fairy floss, pichu mithai, buddhi ka baal, or old woman's hair. The sweet treat goes by several names. It's pink, it's wispy, sugary sweet. The fluffy clouds on sticks adorn every fair, amusement park, carnival. Can such a treat to both eyes and the tongue perhaps give you cancer? Some India authorities believe so. So they have banned its sale. The southern state of Tamil Nadu and the Union Territory of Puducherry are leading the charge. They will not allow cotton candies to be sold. This has sent alarm bells ringing. Other states are also growing skeptical. Andhra Pradesh government has directed officials in all the districts to send candy samples for testing. Why is this happening? Why is cotton candy being linked to risks of cancer? Well, the answer is in its color. The fluorescent pink hue that makes cotton candy appealing comes from an industrial dye. It's called rhodamine B. Yes, an industrial dye is being used in a food item, the same one used in textiles, cosmetics and inks. And it has been accepted for years. Studies have shown that it can increase the risk of cancer. Europe and the American state of California have classified it as a carcinogen. They have made its use in the food industry illegal. If you are watching this show from India, chances are you grew up eating cotton candy or buddhi ke baal. Unfortunately, we were most likely consuming rhodamine B all this while. Most of the time, the candy is made by independent sellers and not registered factories. Even those cotton candies that are not artificially colored are unsafe to consume because they are made in unhygienic conditions, in iron machines. At times, the iron fillings from the machine get mixed with the sugar. So one way or another, the candy is bound to have some negative impact on your health. But now there is increased awareness about this sticky, melt-in-mouth sweet treat. While banning cotton candy, Tamil Nadu's health minister issued a statement saying the use of rhodamine B in the packaging, import, sale of food or serving food containing it at weddings and other public events would be punishable under the Food Safety and Standards Act 2006. Reports say food safety officials in Delhi are also pushing for a ban on cotton candy. Can you imagine a carnival or a trade fair without it? Well, now it seems like you will have to. It is time to bid farewell to this part of your childhood. And this just makes one wonder, is there any food item out there that is entirely safe? Remember what happened in the year 2015? India's most famous instant noodle and a household staple, Maggi, came under fire. After scrutiny, it was found to contain excessively high levels of lead. Research found that the noodles contained a lead concentration of 17.2 parts per million. This was nearly 7 times the permissible limit. And I hope you know what lead can do to your body. It can cause hearing and speech problems. It can also damage the brain and nervous system. After the finding, all batches of Maggi were recalled. The bright yellow packet went missing from the Indian kitchens for 5 months, after which its healthier version was relaunched. Last year, there were controversies around Bournvita as well. The chocolate malt drink is marketed as a health supplement. It has been a household name for years. Your children may even refuse to sip their milk without it. But there were reports that prolonged consumption of Bournvita may lead to diabetes because the malt drink takes up about half of daily sugar limit for children. You see, just because a food item has been around for years, it does not guarantee that it is safe or healthy. Let's now get you this piece of news from India. The Central Board of Secondary Education, or CBSE, has proposed a pilot series of open book exams later in the year. Basically, the open book exams will allow the students to bring their textbooks and notes to the examination hall and refer to them while taking a test. The pilot project will be held in some select schools later in the year and will be for students between classes 9 to 12, which means middle school and high school. Not every subject will be covered though. Classes 9 and 10 will appear in mathematics, English and science, and classes 11 and 12 will appear in English, mathematics and biology. The purpose, according to the board, is to assess higher order thinking skills, including application, critical and creative thinking, and problem-solving abilities. This also is the primary difference between open book exams and traditional closed book exams, where no reference material is allowed and students rely solely on memorization. While it may sound easy, open book exams are not easier than traditional closed book exams. They are designed to test knowledge beyond facts and definitions and aim to check whether a student understands the larger concept of the material studied. And for teachers as well, designing the questions is quite challenging as they cannot be direct. What these tests do achieve is reduced stress levels in students as they feel more confident with the material around them. Also encouraging students to delve deeper into their subject matter as they need to understand the underlying concepts and apply them to different scenarios. The CBSE has experimented with this before. In 2014, the board had introduced an open text-based examination where students were allowed to refer to material provided to them 4 months before the examination. They discontinued this in 2017 because of its inability to cultivate critical abilities in students as they had expected. Open book exams, in fact, are quite popular in a few countries around the world, like Germany, the US, Australia. If the CBSE's pilot project goes as planned, they might implement this in all their schools next year for classes 9 to 12. These exams also fall in line with larger reforms planned for the Indian education system. One of the plans is to move students from rote memorization to competency-based learning. Well, our gut says this will be beneficial. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas Tonight. This is me, Molly Gambhir, signing off. We are leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching. Have a good weekend.
African Union leaders condemn Israel's offensive in Gaza as the most flagrant violation of international humanitarian law. The summit accuses Israel of exterminating Gaza's inhabitants and tells it to immediately end operations. Two-pronged protests take place in Democratic Republic of Congo, capital of Kinshasa. While on the one hand, protesters accuse the West of supporting the M23 rebels in the conflict-hit East, the women are fed up with the fighting in Goma. And a sculptor in Gabon transforms salvaged paper into fine art. World of Africa, at these times, only on WION World is One.
We are one, you and I. Burning in the sun. Rising in the rain. One in celebration. One in pain. One in a tragedy. One for our rights. One in search of hope. One in our fights. One beyond borders. One beyond our race. One in the face of adversity. We are one, you and I, and it's our right to know how and why. WION, you are more connected than you know.